Inside the imperial palace of Rome, a woman is standing very still. She has learned how to do this. Stillness keeps you alive here. In her hands is a small tablet, soft wax pressed into wood. It was never meant for her. A child brought it by mistake. A simple error, the kind that ends lives. She reads the names once, then again. This is not a message. This is not a warning. It is a list. Executions at dawn. Her name is first. Somewhere nearby, water echoes against stone. The emperor is bathing. He always bathes before he drinks. He always drinks before he sleeps. Rituals never change. That is how she knows how little time she has. She has served this man for years. She has poured his wine. She has watched his moods. She has survived by learning when to disappear and when to smile. Tonight, survival requires something else. Because the man who rules Rome has decided she should die. And when an emperor like Commodus wants you dead, there is no escape. Only minutes. And one decision that will change history. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. Inside the imperial palace of Rome, nothing happened by accident. Every step, every silence, every whispered word carried weight. People who lived here understood one rule above all others. The palace was not a place of safety. It was a place of waiting. Waiting to be noticed. Waiting to be forgotten. Waiting to be chosen. Marcia had learned this over many years. She did not remember the last time she felt truly relaxed. Even sleep inside the palace was light and broken. You learned to wake at the smallest sound. Footsteps in the hall. A door opening too slowly. The wrong voice calling your name. People disappeared often. Not loudly. Not dramatically. They were simply gone. Their rooms cleared. Their belongings removed. Their names never spoken again. Asking questions only made you noticeable. And being noticeable was dangerous. That was how Commodus ruled. Not through laws. Not through speeches. But through fear that lived in the walls. Marcia had survived because she understood this. She kept her eyes low. Her voice soft. Her movements predictable. Every night, she performed the same task. Same cup. Same wine. Same careful steps. Routine was protection. Until tonight. The tablet felt heavier than it should have. Thin wood. Soft wax. Ordinary. Deadly. She stood alone when she opened it. No witnesses. No sound except her own breath. The palace seemed to hold still with her, as if it already knew what was written there. Names. Written by a steady hand. No hesitation. No emotion. Lists like this were never drafts. They were orders. Executions at dawn. Marcia read the first name and felt nothing. Shock comes later. First comes disbelief. The mind tries to reject what it sees. She read again. Slower this time. Her name was first. Not in the middle. Not at the bottom. First. There was no appeal from that position. Being first meant certainty. It meant the emperor had already decided. Whatever she had done, or whatever he believed she had done, no longer mattered. Guilt was irrelevant. Innocence did not exist here. Only survival, or death. She closed the tablet carefully, pressing the wax smooth as if that could undo what she had seen. Her hands did not shake yet. Her body had learned to stay calm in danger. Panic wasted time. Time was the one thing she no longer had. Somewhere inside the palace, water echoed again. Commodus was still bathing. He always bathed before nightfall. Long baths. Hot water. Silence. Afterwards, he drank wine. Always wine. Always served by the same hands. That ritual had never changed. Marcia knew what happened when rituals were broken. Commodus noticed everything. A different face, a slower step, a cup held too tightly. Fear was visible to him, and fear made him curious. Curiosity was deadly. She thought of the others on the list. She had not read all the names yet, but she did not need to. Anyone on that tablet was already dead in the emperor's mind. Heads on pikes, bodies in the river. Families erased. This was how Commodus maintained control. Not by killing everyone, but by killing just enough. Everyone inside the palace understood this. That was why voices were low. That was why laughter sounded false. That was why no one trusted tomorrow. Marcia took a slow breath. The emperor would leave his bath soon. When he did, he would look at her face. And if he saw that she knew, she would not live to see the sunrise. She slipped the tablet away and began to walk. Carefully, normally, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Because once your name appeared on a list like that, the palace was no longer a cage. It was an execution chamber waiting to be sealed. Long before the lists. Long before the arena. Long before the palace learned how to whisper. There was a boy. He was born into power so complete that it felt natural, like air. Marble floors beneath his feet. Gold on the walls. Servants who bowed before he spoke. Guards who watched every movement of his body as if it mattered more than their own lives. His name was Commodus. He was the son of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor. A man who believed in discipline, restraint, and control of the self. A man who wrote about virtue while ruling the most powerful empire in the world. And this was his son. The boy grew up inside the imperial palace, surrounded by people who never said no. People who learned very early that pleasing him mattered more than truth. More than safety. More than life. When Commodus was 11 years old, he stepped into his bath. The water was not hot enough. For most children, this would have been a complaint. A moment of impatience. Something forgotten within minutes. But this child did not complain. He ordered the servant responsible for the bath to be punished. He ordered the man thrown into the furnace that heated the water. Alive. The servants froze. Commodus was only a child. He did not yet have the legal authority to execute anyone. But they understood something more important. One day, he would. So they made a choice. They took lambs and threw them into the furnace instead. The wool burned quickly. The fat hissed and cracked. The smell filled the corridor. Thick, heavy, unmistakable. The boy smelled it. He paused, listened, thought. Then he nodded and sank deeper into the water. He believed a man had just been burned alive on his orders. And the only thing he felt was satisfaction. The problem had been solved. That moment was not a turning point. It was a warning. The cruelty did not grow later. It was already there, complete, waiting for the day when no one would protect the people around him with tricks and lies. Marcus Aurelius tried to change this. He did everything a man like him could do. He brought philosophers from across the empire to educate his son. He spoke to him about duty, about self-control, about responsibility. He even took Commodus on military campaigns, hoping the reality of command would shape him. None of it worked. A historian who lived through what followed later wrote that Marcus Aurelius had only one deep regret in life. After giving his son the best education possible, he realized it had failed. When Marcus Aurelius died, Commodus was 19. From that moment on, there were no more lambs, no more delays, no more barriers between the boy and his impulses. Commodus did not want to rule Rome. He wanted to be worshipped by it. He believed he was more than human. He believed he was the living image of a god. He ordered statues reshaped in his likeness. He renamed buildings. He renamed time itself. He demanded devotion, not loyalty. But words were not enough. He needed to be seen. He needed to be feared. He needed witnesses. And that was when he chose the arena. The place where blood explained power better than any law ever could. Rome would not just obey him. Rome would watch. And it would applaud. The arena was never meant to belong to him. It was a place for punishment. For criminals. For prisoners of war. For men already marked for death. The crowd came to watch violence so the city could release its fear in one place and then return to order. Commodus saw something else. He saw a stage. When the emperor entered the arena, Rome held its breath. Not because they loved him. Not because they admired his skill. But because they understood what the arena had become. It was no longer a game. It was a test. Of loyalty. Commodus fought again and again. Hundreds of times. More than any emperor before him. He did not hide behind generals or guards. He stepped into the sand dressed as a god, wearing the skin of a lion, carrying weapons meant to look heroic. But nothing about these fights was real. His opponents were chosen carefully. Men with no chance to win. Some were given wooden swords. Some were chained. Some were drugged so heavily they could barely stand. Commodus fought with real steel against bodies prepared to fall. Every victory was guaranteed. And every victory cost Rome. For each appearance, Commodus charged the empire an enormous fee. Money drained from a treasury already under pressure. Grain supplies weakened. Soldiers went unpaid. But no one dared to object. Complaints sounded too much like disloyalty. Disloyalty led to lists. The senators were forced to attend every fight. They sat in the front rows where Commodus could see their faces clearly. They did not clap. They did not cheer. They chanted. The words were written for them. Practiced. Required. Praise repeated again and again until it lost meaning. Until it became sound without thought. They chanted because their lives depended on it. They chanted because if their voices weakened, if their enthusiasm looked false, if the emperor saw doubt in their eyes, they would not return home. This happened not once, not twice, hundreds of times. But even this was not enough. Commodus needed more. He ordered soldiers to collect disabled men from the streets. Men who could not run. Men who could not fight. Men who survived only because Rome usually ignored them. They were brought into the arena and dressed as monsters from old stories. False limbs. Painted skin. Shapes meant to provoke laughter or fear. They were given sponges. Not weapons. Not protection. Sponges. Commodus entered dressed as Hercules, club in hand, smiling. He beat these men to death one by one while tens of thousands watched. The crowd cheered because silence would have been noticed. Fear made applause easy. One afternoon, Commodus killed an ostrich and lifted its severed head. Blood dripped onto the sand. He walked slowly toward the senators, holding the head close to their faces. He said nothing. He smiled. He watched. He searched their expressions for disgust, for fear, for anything that was not devotion. One wrong reaction would have been enough. So they smiled back. Some bit into leaves. Some stared at the sand. Some felt their bodies betray them and fought it with everything they had. The arena was no longer entertainment. It was a mirror. And in that mirror, Rome saw what absolute power looked like when it no longer needed to pretend. The emperor did not rule from a throne. He ruled from the sand. What the crowd saw in the arena was only the surface. The palace was something else. Inside those walls, there were no rules. No witnesses who mattered. No crowds to impress. Only power, unchecked and private. The kind of power that does not perform. The kind that experiments. People were brought into the palace every week. Some came from noble families. Some came from the streets. Some did not know why they had been chosen at all. It did not matter. Once inside, they belonged to the emperor. There were many of them, women and young men, gathered from every level of Roman society. Titles disappeared here. A senator's wife stood beside a girl who had never owned shoes. Both wore the same clothes. Both followed the same orders. Both learned very quickly that their bodies were no longer their own. This was not pleasure. It was control. Commodus did not spend his days ruling. Others handled reports and laws. He lived in the baths and banquet rooms, surrounded by people who existed only to be used. Every night followed patterns. Patterns designed to erase dignity. He ordered his own concubines to be taken by other men while he watched. Not in secret. Not from behind curtains. He sat openly, observing, correcting, deciding when it ended. This was not desire. It was instruction. A lesson repeated night after night. Nothing in this palace belonged to you. Not your body. Not your pain. Not your shame. And it was not limited to those without power. One day, Commodus summoned the head of his own guard, a man responsible for the emperor's safety, a man who commanded soldiers. In front of his staff, Commodus pushed him fully clothed into a pool, then ordered him to strip, then ordered him to dance. No one laughed. No one looked away. Humiliation was not accidental. It was public, carefully placed. A reminder that rank meant nothing when the emperor was watching. Commodus also liked knives. Not for war, not for execution, for curiosity. He took real medical tools and cut into living people. Not criminals, not enemies, people from his own household. He watched blood flow with interest. Some died on the table while he stood over them, calm and focused. He called it medicine. It was cruelty pretending to be science. He bathed many times a day, ate in the water, walked into temples without cleansing himself. Sacred spaces meant nothing to him. Blood and excess followed wherever he went. Those trapped inside the palace learned to disappear without moving, to speak without sound, to feel nothing on their faces while everything broke inside. There was no exit. You lived because he forgot you. You died when he remembered. And over time, the lists grew longer. Suspicion became routine. Paranoia became policy. Families vanished. Names were erased. People were killed not for what they did, but for how they looked, or who they resembled, or what the emperor dreamed the night before. This was the world Marcia had survived for years. This was the world that produced the tablet in her hands. And this was the world that would end her by morning if nothing changed. The palace did not care who was right. It only cared who acted first. The emperor had no friends. Not in the palace. Not in the city. Not in his own family. Everyone who came close learned that proximity was danger. They learned that loyalty was measured in how little fear showed on your face. They learned that survival depended on disappearing into the shadows while he moved freely, testing, observing, punishing. Marcia knew all of this. She had seen it for years. Names appeared on lists. Heads appeared on spikes. Families vanished. And yet, she had survived. Until tonight. The tablet had changed everything. Her name was first. The others she trusted were there too. Latus, head of the Praetorian Guard. He had seen what happened to the people on these lists. He knew the rules. He also knew there were no rules. Anyone who appeared on a list was dead unless someone acted first. Then there was Eclectus, a man who had served Commodus for years. He knew every corridor, every trap, every servant who could carry a message. He also knew that once Commodus decided someone was a threat, there was no appeal, no negotiation, no mercy. 3 people. 1 list. 1 chance. Marcia thought of the wine. She had poured it for him countless times. Every night. Same cup. Same careful pour. Same hands that trembled only when the emperor was near. Tonight, it became a weapon. She added the poison. Carefully. Slowly. Methodically. Years of preparation had led to this moment. Years of watching, learning, surviving. Years of quiet planning, knowing that one day, her knowledge might be the only thing standing between life and death. Commodus emerged from the bath. Steam clung to the marble. The emperor smiled. Or at least, he thought he smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed in his own immortality. He lifted the cup, took it from her hands. The same cup he had accepted 1,000 times before. Moments passed. Then a change. The emperor's face paled. His stomach contracted violently. His body fought the poison. But he had been a gladiator, trained to endure pain beyond ordinary limits. Strength like his did not break easily. He convulsed. He vomited. The palace seemed to hold its breath. And then, fear settled in. Marcia understood immediately. If he survived this night, none of them would live. Not her. Not Lattice. Not Eclectus. The purge that followed would destroy anyone connected to this moment. Families. Friends. Allies. Anyone he remembered. There was no time for hesitation. She sent word to Narcissus, the young wrestler who had trained the emperor himself. He knew the body, the strength, the limits of the man who called himself Hercules. She offered him a fortune. He accepted. The palace was silent as he moved through the corridors. Guards were reassigned. Hallways were empty. Only the sound of vomiting behind a closed door marked the presence of the emperor, the god of Rome, brought low by a single dose of poison and careful planning. And when Narcissus entered, the most powerful man in the world, the one who had forced Rome to chant his name, the one who had humiliated, tortured, and killed without thought, was trembling on cold marble. Weak, human, mortal, the god had fallen. The emperor lay on the cold marble floor, gasping, unable to rise. The wine, poisoned carefully by hands that had served him for years, had taken its toll. For the first time in his life, Commodus could not fight. He could not roar. He could not command. He could not move. The palace had watched him for 12 years. 12 years of fear. 12 years of ritualized cruelty. 12 years of blood. And now, for the first time, the blood did not belong to anyone else. Marcia, Lattice, and Eclectus moved quietly. Every step was measured. Every sound held in check. This was the moment that could either save them or destroy them. There was no second chance. Narcissus, the emperor's own wrestler, entered the room. He had trained with Commodus for years. He knew his strength. He knew his speed. He knew every trick the emperor might try to survive. But there was nothing left. The poison had weakened every muscle. The arrogance that had carried him through countless battles in the arena now betrayed him. Commodus tried to lift himself. His hands clawed at the marble. His eyes searched for help, for a voice to command, for someone to obey him. But there was no one to answer. Narcissus pressed his hands to the emperor's throat. Commodus's fingers grabbed at him instinctively, but they could not hold. Years of combat, years of strength, all reduced to nothing in seconds. The struggle was short, brutal, final. Commodus understood immediately that the god he believed himself to be was gone, that the mortal man beneath the costume, the lion's skin, and the crown had no defense against those who had served him silently, patiently, and wisely. And then it was over. Commodus died on the palace floor, 31 years old. The man who had made senators chant his name. The man who had made Rome tremble. The man who had forced the weak and innocent to perform for his amusement. Dead. The palace breathed. But there was no relief. Only the quiet understanding of what had just happened. The lists, the blood, the fear, all of it had ended, but the echoes would remain. Marcia survived the night, but not for long. The empire had no place for those who wielded power, even indirectly. Latus, Eclectus, and Narcissus continued to navigate the shadows, knowing that survival required constant vigilance. Names could disappear tomorrow. Alliances could vanish today. Rome itself did not mourn. The Senate cast the gladiator's body into a burial pit. Statues were torn down, plaques removed, the arenas renamed. Time, once marked by his arrogance, returned to its old rhythm. Yet one memory remained clear. One night, one cup of wine, one choice, one woman who dared act when the emperor himself believed he was immortal. 12 years of terror ended not with armies, not with a revolt, not with a conspiracy, but with careful planning, knowledge, and courage. Commodus, the self-proclaimed god, the destroyer of Rome's dignity, died as all men die, powerless. The empire would rebuild, slowly. Histories would remember him for his cruelty, for his obsession, for his reign of terror. But the night of December 31st, 192, would remain the night when fear finally found its master. And the one who held the cup would be remembered only by those who understood what it meant to survive when the world itself had no mercy. The palace was silent again. But silence was temporary. In Rome, power always found a way to return. And so history moved forward. If you enjoy dark, untold history, subscribe because we uncover what others won't.